Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Fundação Champalimaud for this evening's event, Society, an Ongoing Experiment. Tonight we have a wonderful array of speakers who are going to explore and challenge our view of society. My name's Scott. I'm a student in the Champalimaud Neuroscience program. Guys? So, anyway, I'm from Belfast. It's a very nice city. The beer is wonderful, but it's a little cold, but a lot of fun. But inevitably, growing up in Northern Ireland, you're exposed to a great deal of social conflict. In Northern Ireland, there's tension between the Catholic community that wants to be part of United Ireland and the Protestant community that wants to remain part of the UK. These images are from riots in the Ardoyne, where members of the Catholic community are protesting against divisive marches by Protestants through their area. And this image is taken from just over a week ago, when members of the Protestant community started protesting and continued rioting over the removal of the British flag from the City Hall in Belfast. Now, of course, these social problems are not unique to Northern Ireland, unfortunately. We've all seen, and many of us have taken part, in the marches that have come in the wake of the austerity measures and the crisis here in Portugal and the rest of Europe. And in Portugal, like other countries in Europe, it seems that people are not so much in conflict with each other as they are in Northern Ireland, but in conflict with the government, regardless of which power is in charge. Even so, when we talk about these issues, when we sit down and have wine with our friends in the evening, our conversation all too quickly turns to governments as the cause and maybe the solution to all these problems. We often refer to powerful organizations, whether it's our own government, the US government, the UN, the church, and more recently, Troika. And we have to ask ourselves, is this the best way that we can approach society? Are we perhaps undermining our own role by focusing on these powerful organizations? And to understand that, we have to try and decide what society is. We can define society as human society, the sum of all interactions, relationships, and institutions that make up humanity. We can also define it culturally, in Western society, or perhaps European society. Or we can narrow this even further and refer to our own nation state, whether it's Ireland, the UK, or Portugal. But of course, there's many different types of society beyond these forms. For example, most of us here are probably members of internet societies, such as Facebook, or Google+, Twitter, or Reddit. And many of my colleagues are also members of an association, the Society for Neuroscience. So what this tells us is that society is not simply exclusively defined by institutions, by governments, by shared values, more that it is the product of the relationships that exist between its members. Now, just over a year ago, in one of our first R events, in fact, our second R event, Emergence Patterns on the Edge of Chaos, we explored how relationships like this, how local interactions can give rise to surprising, ordered, coherent behavior. We also saw that often we see these organized examples of behavior as having a leader. Deborah Gordon gave the example of ants, in which colonies produce much behavior that we associate with complex group behavior. For example, they produce things like mass transit, division of labor, foraging, and even war, without any central control. But when we try and see this same order emerging for free in human societies, it's very confusing. It's hard for us to take a step back and understand exactly where the order is. Our society seems very chaotic. But one of the things that we can learn from looking at animal research is perhaps some of the surprising rules that might be behind this. Again, when you look at this image, there's no clear order in the way these animals are behaving. But if you simply take a step back, look at things from a slightly different perspective, you can see that these surprising, beautiful patterns emerge. And these patterns emerge from following very simple rules. Each bird wants to maintain a certain distance from the other birds, but a certain proximity to the rest of the group. And when you see this, I want you to ask yourselves, which bird is deciding which way this group moves? How fast and for what reason? Our first speaker this evening, Ian Cousins, is going to talk about how local interactions give rise to these organized patterns, asking how do local interactions drive the dynamics of social groups and begin to bridge the gap between animal swarms and human behavior. Now we've taken a step back to see how these emergent patterns can come out of spontaneously from human behavior. But to understand the content of the interactions and the way we relate to others, we have to look inward and try and examine the way we behave towards other people. Game theory is a form of mathematically formalizing the interactions between ourselves and others, and this can reveal striking regularities in the way we behave, rules that we follow that we may not be aware of. So I'd like to introduce the two co-organizers that helped produce this event. On the left, we have Danby, and on the right, we have Rita. And they're going to help me play a very simple game theoretical game called the ultimatum game. Now, the rules of this game are really very simple. Bear with me. So first, I start by giving Danby on the left 100 euros. And she has to decide how much of this money she wants to give to Rita. Rita then has to decide how much of that money she wants to keep. And if she accepts the offer, then, if she accepts the offer, then they both leave with the amount of money that they've divvied out. And if Rita refuses the offer, she leaves with nothing. Now, it's important to realize that it's not in the interest of Rita to refuse any offer. If Danby offers her 5 euros or 10 euros or 15 euros, she would still leave 5, 10, or 15 euros richer. But if she refuses but let's see what Danby does. So in this first case, Danby offers 50 euros. And this tends to be the average way that humans behave. When we conduct this study across many different environments, whether it's hunter-gatherers, business people, university students, the normal behavior is the same. People tend to offer around 50%. And humans tend to accept this. In this case, Rita is happy with the offer, and she accepts the money. Now, what happens when Danby offers a lower amount? So in this case, Danby offers 20 euros. And Rita has the option to reject this offer. And if she does so, they both get nothing. Now again, it's important to realize that if Rita rejects this offer, she loses out on 20 euros and gains nothing. But in this case, she rejects the offer. And this is again what humans do, which reveals a surprising rule, that when this offer falls beneath 20%, people reject it. And what this shows us is that humans have a striking desire to be fair. When they have the option to give an amount of money, they tend to give 50% of it. But if someone violates this rule, by giving 20% or lower, then people are very willing to punish that person. And this reveals a striking way in the way we interact with others. I want to ask you guys a question. If you saw someone injured on the street or in need of help, how many people here would help that person? Can you raise your hands? So most of you, which is nice. This is good. If you said no, this would be worrying. What I'm going to show you now, if the pointer continues to work, is what's called the bystander effect. So in this case, an actress, she's not in any way injured, is lying on the ground, pretending to be hurt. And each of these people who are walking past her doubtlessly would answer the same way that you all just did, and say, no, of course I would help somebody. But within 4 minutes, more than 40 people have passed by and done nothing. People still look directly at her and don't respond. So the question is, why would people, and it's been shown in many experiments that humans are altruistic, they like to help each other, why is it then in a real-world situation, when part of a larger group, they somehow conform and don't help the person who's in need? Though someone does actually help at about 4 minutes and 45 seconds. So what the question this raises is, even though we're good people, like we want to help others, somehow being part of a larger group can bias our behavior in unexpected ways. Our second speaker of the evening, Simo Ruturina, is going to explore how the way we interact with others, how we can be more aware of the way we interact with others, and hopefully with an eye to how this will affect the way organizations function. Now, at the beginning of this talk, I mentioned that perhaps looking only to governments is not necessarily the best way for us to figure out how to deal with these social problems, relying on these higher powers. So one other way we can possibly do this is to experiment with these rules that we've explored and see different ways in which society can exist. One type of experiment with this is transformational festivals. This is an aerial image of Burning Man. It's a festival in the Nevada desert. And for the 7 days it exists, this is the second largest city and has about 50,000 people attending. Now, Burning Man has some particular aspects to its philosophy. One of the rules that they have is radical participation. And basically what they're saying is that for us to make transformational change to ourselves and to our society, that we need to radically engage with that society. They also play with our rules of fairness by having what they call a gift economy. Now, in a normal trade economy, when I give someone something, I expect something of approximately equal value to be returned. But in this case, you give without even contemplating anything in return. But of course, festivals, fun as they are not the only form of social experimentation. Historically, many social movements have emerged out of crises. And in the wake of the financial crisis, the Occupy movement has emerged, inspired by the Arab Spring and their ability to spontaneously self-organize using social media. Occupy has a commitment to direct democracy. Rather than having leaders, they have working groups in which each individual is encouraged to express their opinion, and then facilitators work on creating a consensus which leads to action. There are also longer-term social experiments. People who have been building communities and trying to experiment with the rules in which we interact. One such community is Tamara in Alentejo, and two of the residents, Benjamin and Barbara, are going to explain to us the results they've seen in the experiment they've been running, which is to create a non-violent space where people can coexist sustainably. And ask the question, how can we make society better? Now, for other talks you're going to see, I want you to ask yourselves these two questions. This goes beyond simply exploring science. We want to see how this affects our lives. And I want you to ask yourself, what would I change in society to make my life better? How would I change myself to help that process? And we're going to explore this issue at the end with the roundtable with Zachary Mannon. And now I'd like to introduce Rita, who's going to be your host for the rest of the evening. Thank you.